about the results of the 2020 election. Joining our conversation is investigative reporter for NBC4 Washington, Scott MacFarlane. He interviewed Copeland from jail on Saturday. Frank Figliuzzi is still here. So I can't say it on family-friendly TV what he said, but tell me about the suspect. He seems to not have any remorse.
Yeah, Landon Copeland's an Iraq War veteran, Nicole. He was one of the higher-profile defendants in January 6th, in part because he's accused of assaulting police, one of the more serious charges, but also because he had an outburst at a hearing last month. He screamed vulgarities at the judge, called the judge a robot, told the judge she can't get to him unless he wants to be gotten to. He called this weekend, overnight. Got to tell you, that was a surprise because his case is only in its beginning stages. He hasn't even yet entered a not guilty plea, but he called to talk about the case. He said he has no regrets, doesn't think he committed a crime, but he acknowledges he was there January 6th. He acknowledges he grabbed that police riot shield and toppled an officer. And when I pressed him on it, he says that Donald Trump was a great president and that he still has questions, Nicole, about the 2020 election.
Does he deny that he committed crimes, or he just doesn't want to be held accountable for them?
Oh, he denies that he committed crimes and does so after acknowledging he grabbed a police riot shield and struck police. So I asked him, you know, you can't hit police. And he says the police, in his mind, were trying to direct people, including him, towards the chemical spray. And he thought that was a threat. Police were trying to remove the crowd January 6th. So none of that came as a surprise, though maybe it was a surprise to Landon Copeland.
You know, Frank, I don't know what the right words are, you know, horror, despair, you know, hearing about sort of an unrepentant insurrectionist. I want to play an ad, though, that gets me to my next point about alternate realities. This ad was, nobody on Fox News wanted you to see this. Watch.
I'm proud of the officers I worked with on January 6th. They fought extremely hard. Our worst nightmare really come true, an attack on American democracy right here in the nation's capital. I experienced the most brutal, savage, hand-to-hand combat of my entire life. I received chemical burns to my face that still have not healed to this day.
I just remember people still swinging metal poles at us, and they were pushing and shoving. They were spraying us with, bear mace and pepper spray.
They were all shouting at us, calling us traitors. It's been very difficult seeing elected officials and other individuals whitewash the events of that day or downplay what happened. As an American and as an Army veteran, it's sad to see us attacked by our fellow citizens.
So, Frank, one of the dangers of the Republican efforts to erase our memories of 1/6 is that it becomes part of the right-wing disinformation chamber that didn't exist. I mean, that wasn't an ad. Those were clips on TV put into an ad and then banned from Fox News. Where does the zealousness to keep the facts and the reality out of that sort of disinformation chamber come from?
Nicole, I'm really glad you put these two stories together. The story of the really mind-boggling interview that this guy gave voluntarily. I'm sure if he has a lawyer, the lawyer's flipping out right now. And then the story of Fox News declining this ad. They go together because you and I have talked repeatedly about one of the antidotes to violent extremism and violent ideology being repeated exposure to the truth, right? So when you hear this guy in his interview, you see someone that it exhibits the signs that we looked for in law enforcement and intelligence, which is dedication to the cause and the degree of dedication and the lack of remorse, even when confronted with arrest and his freedom being deprived, right? This is someone who potentially could be willing to die for his deluded cause. All right, now, how do we get people like that out of that violent ideology? Exposure to the truth. Well, on Fox News, at least, you can't even pay them to air the truth. This becomes extremely difficult if the antidote to extremist ideology is exposure to the truth, and there's an entire cable network that won't let you hear and see the truth, even from active duty police officers who were there. We've got a problem, and that speaks really badly about the prognosis of our nation in terms of not developing a permanent insurgency and getting people out of the rabbit holes that they're in.
I mean, Frank, I also think at a human level, what a disgrace that one of the two parties is incapable of honoring those men and women. Among them are veterans. I mean, how are we at a place, and I understand that counter-extremism is a different piece of the problem, but you've got in Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell, two men who proudly whipped votes against a bipartisan commission to investigate what happened to those men and women on that tape. How do you address sort of the other end of that food chain?
So you're right. We have now, apparently we will never have a bipartisan commission to look to the truth. This means that masterfully what that party has done is they've pushed this over into a completely partisan inquiry, if we have one at all, so that many in our population will say, these people are just doing politics. I can't believe anything. I'm not going to tune into the commission hearings. That's a problem. And then, you know, the other thing that's really happened that's scary here is they're turning against police officers. So the party that said, we back the blue, we have cops for Trump rallies, is now refusing to air active duty police officers. And what did this guy who was interviewed say? The police were a threat. The police were a threat. So everything is on its head. How you counter that is an incredibly difficult task. The party essentially is collapsing on itself, but becoming increasingly a national security threat as it happens. That's how I see it. I see it as a security threat.
Scott, what's going to happen to your phone pal?
Well, he was in court this morning. They've ordered a competency exam, and his case is on hold till the competency exam is done. He remains locked up in the meantime. But to Frank's point, there's an unfortunate reality for those who want this story to go away. It's going nowhere. All these filings and all of these 490 cases are clogging up the D.C. federal court. The soonest we'll get a trial, likely February 2022. This story's going to be around for a while, whether people like that or not.
And you'll be on it, and we're grateful to have you as part of our conversation. Scott MacFarlane, Frank